I never thought my marriage would take a turn like this. My name is Mike, and I work in real estate here in Miami. My wife, Jessica, is a fitness trainer, and she's got the looks to match. Beautiful and sexy, the kind that makes heads turn. We've been married for 6 years, and I thought we were happy. But lately things have been different. It all started one evening when Jessica and I were having dinner. She had that look on her face, the one she gets when she's about to drop a bombshell. "There's something I want to talk to you about," she said, her voice calm but serious. I put down my fork and looked at her. "What's on your mind, Jess?" She took a deep breath. "I've been thinking a lot about our marriage, and I want to try an open marriage." I blinked, not sure I heard her right. "An open mariage? You mean like seeing other people?" She nodded. "Yes. I think it could be good for us. It would bring some excitement back into our lives." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Jessica, are you serious? How is sleeping with other people supposed to help our marriage?" "It's not just about sex, Mike. It's about freedom and trust. We've been together for a long time, and I think this could help us grow." I felt like the ground was slipping from under me. "I don't know, Jess. This sounds crazy." She reached across the table and took my hand. "Please, Mike, just think about it. For me." I didn't have the heart to say no right then and there. I love her too much. "All right, I'll think about it." That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind was racing with all sorts of thoughts and doubts. The next day, I called my best friend Dan. We met up at a coffee shop to talk. "Dan, you're not going to believe this," I said, sitting down across from him. "Jessica wants to try an open marriage." His eyes widened. "What? Are you kidding me?" "Nope. She says it'll help us grow or something." Dan shook his head. "Mike, this sounds like trouble. Are you sure about this?" "I'm not sure about anything right now. I just don't want to lose her." "Well, if you need anything, you know I'm here for you." "Thanks, Dan. I appreciate it." The following week, Jessica and I talked more about her idea. She was persistent, and eventually, I reluctantly agreed to give it a shot. I was scared, but also curious about where this would lead us. Jessica wasted no time. She started getting more attention from her admirers at the gym, especially Carlos, the gym owner. One evening, after her shift, she came home with a strange excitement in her eyes. "Mike, I've got a surprise for you," she said with a mischievous smile. "What is it?" I asked, trying to sound enthusiastic. "I've arranged for us to meet a couple of guys I know from the gym, Lucas and Ryan. They're interested in helping us explore this new arrangement." My stomach churned. "Jessica, I don't know if I'm ready for this." She wrapped her arms around me. "Trust me, Mike, it's going to be amazing." I nodded, though I wasn't convinced. The night of the meeting, I felt like I was walking into a nightmare. Lucas and Ryan were friendly enough, but I couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal gnawing at my gut. As the evening progressed, Jessica's excitement grew. She was in her element, flirting and laughing. I, on the other hand, felt like an outsider in my own marriage. The night ended without any physical encounters, but the stage was set. Jessica was determined to push forward with her plan. I knew a storm was brewing, and I had no idea how to weather it. The days following our meeting with Lucas and Ryan were a blur. Jessica was more excited than ever, and I was struggling to keep my composure. Every time I looked at her, I saw a stranger. A beautiful, confident stranger who seemed to be slipping away from me. I got a call from Jessica while I was at the office. "Mike, I've set something up for tonight. I want you to meet someone new." I sighed. "Who is it this time?" "His name is Ben. He's a regular at the gym. I think you'll like him." I didn't want to go, but I knew saying no wouldn't change anything. "All right, il est there." That evening, I met Jessica and Ben at a bar downtown. Ben was tall, athletic, and oozed confidence. He greeted me with a firm handshake and a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "So, Mike, Jessica tells me you're in real estate. How's the market treating you?" Ben asked, making small talk. "It's busy," I replied, not really in the mood for chit-chat. Jessica shot me a look, urging me to be more engaging. I forced a smile and tried to make conversation, but my heart wasn't in it. The whole situation felt surreal, like I was watching someone else's life unfold. As the night went on, Jessica and Ben grew closer, their chemistry undeniable. I could see the attraction between them, and it made my stomach turn. By the time we left the bar, I was ready to call it quits on this whole open marriage experiment. But Jessica had other plans. "Why don't we all go back to our place?" she suggested, her voice dripping with anticipation. I hesitated, but Ben's eager nod and Jessica's pleading eyes left me no choice. Back at our apartment, Jessica wasted no time. She led us to the living room and poured drinks, the atmosphere charged with tension. Ben sat next to her on the couch, his hand resting on her thigh. "So, Mike, are you ready for this?" Jessica asked, her eyes locked on mine. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. "I guess so." Jessica smiled and leaned in to kiss Ben. I watched, my heart pounding in my chest, as they grew more passionate. I felt like I was drowning in a sea of emotions. Jealousy, anger, sadness, and a twisted curiosity. Suddenly, Ben pulled away and looked at me. "Mike, are you okay with this?" I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Jessica took my hand and led me to the bedroom, Ben following close behind. The room felt like a stage, and I was an unwilling actor in a drama I couldn't control. What happened next was a blur of tangled bodies and raw emotions. I felt like I was on the outside looking in, watching Jessica with Ben, feeling a mix of arousal and revulsion. It was like nothing I'd ever experienced, and I wasn't sure if I'd survive it. The next morning, I woke up feeling hollow. Jessica was already up, her usual bright and cheerful self. "Good morning, Mike," she said, kissing my cheek. "How are you feeling?" I shrugged. "I don't know, Jess. This is all? A lot." She smiled sympathetically. "I know it is, but I think we're doing the right thing. This is good for us." I wasn't so sure, but I loved her and I didn't want to lose her. So I nodded and went along with it, hoping that somehow things would get better. One night, Jessica came home with a mischievous grin on her face. "Mike, I've got a big surprise for you tonight." I raised an eyebrow. "What now, Jess?" "I've arranged for Lucas, Ryan, and Ben to come over tonight. All three of them." My heart sank. "All three? Are you serious?" She nodded enthusiastically. "Yes, I think it'll be fun, don't you?" I didn't know how to respond. I felt like I was being dragged into something I couldn't handle. "I don't know, Jess. This is getting out of hand." She frowned, her playful demeanor fading. "Mike, we talked about this. You said you'd trust me. I do trust you. It's just this is too much." She sighed. "Look, if it makes you uncomfortable, we don't have to do it. But I really think it could be amazing for us." I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "Okay, let's do it." That evening, Lucas, Ryan, and Ben arrived at our apartment. The atmosphere was charged with anticipation and tension. Jessica was in her element, flirting and laughing with the three men. I tried to play along, but my heart wasn't in it. As the night wore on, things escalated quickly. Jessica led us all to the bedroom, her eyes sparkling with excitement. I watched as she kissed Lucas, then Ryan, then Ben, her passion for them obvious. I felt like a ghost, watching from the sidelines as my wife reveled in her newfound freedom. The sight of her with all three men was more than I could bear. I tried to join in, but my heart wasn't in it. I felt a surge of anger and jealousy that I couldn't control. "Stop!" I shouted, pulling Jessica away from them. She looked at me shocked. "What are you doing?" "I can't do this, Jess. I can't watch you with them." Her eyes softened. "Mike, sorry. I didn't realize it was hurting you this much." "It is, Jess. I feel like I'm losing you." She hugged me tightly. "You're not losing me, Mike. I love you. I just wanted to try something new." I pulled away, my anger still simmering. "Well, I can't do this anymore. It's tearing me apart." Before she could respond, Lucas stepped forward. "Hey man, you're not okay with this. We should stop." Ryan and Ben nodded in agreement. "Yeah, we don't want to cause any problems," Ben added. Jessica looked at me, her eyes pleading. "Mike, I love you. Please don't let this ruin us." I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. "I love you too, Jess. But this has to stop. I can't handle it." She nodded, tears in her eyes. "Okay, you stop. For you." I looked at the three men. "You guys should go." They nodded and quickly left, leaving Jessica and me alone. We stood in silence for a moment before she spoke. "I'm so sorry, Mike. I didn't mean to hurt you." I sighed, feeling the weight of the past few weeks crashing down on me. "I know, Jess. I know." Things settled down for a while after that night. Jessica, and I tried to get back to some semblance of normalcy. She seemed genuinely remorseful, and I wanted to believe that we could move past this. But the trust between us had been damaged, and it lingered in the background of our everyday lives. One day while I was at the office, I got a call from my friend Dan. He sounded worried. "Mike, we need to talk. Can you meet me at the coffee shop?" "Sure, I'll be there in an hour," I replied, my stomach knotting with anxiety. When I arrived, Dan was already seated, his face grim. "Mike, I got some bad news. I didn't want to tell you, but you deserve to know." I sat down, my heart pounding. "What is it, Dan?" He took a deep breath. "I saw Jessica with Carlos at a hotel last night. They were together." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. "Are you sure?" Dan nodded. "Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sorry, man. I didn't know what to say." Anger, hurt, and betrayal washed over me. "Thanks for telling me, Dan. I need to go." I left the coffee shop in a daze, my mind racing. How could she do this to me? After everything we'd been through, how could she betray me again? I drove home, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. When I walked through the door, Jessica was in the kitchen cooking dinner. She smiled when she saw me. "Hey, honey, how was your day?" I didn't answer. I just stared at her, the anger boiling over. "I know about you and Carlos." Her smile faded and she looked at me with wide eyes. "What are you talking about?" "Dan saw you at the hotel last night. You and Carlos." She took a step back, her face pale. "Mike, I can explain." "Explain what?" "How you lied to me. How you betrayed me again." Tears welled up in her eyes. "It wasn't supposed to happen. I was weak. I'm so sorry." "Sorry? That's all you have to say?" I shouted, my voice echoing through the house. She reached out to touch me, but I pulled away. "Please, Mike. I love you. It was a mistake." "A mistake?" "This whole thing has been a mistake," I said, my voice shaking with emotion. "I don't know if I can do this anymore, Jessica." Before she could respond, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Carlos standing there looking nervous. "Mike, can we talk?" I clenched my fists, barely holding back my rage. "There's nothing to talk about. Get out of here." Carlos stepped forward, trying to reason with me. "Mike, it wasn't what you think. Jessica and I..." "Shut up," I shouted, my anger boiling over. I swung at him, my fist connecting with his jaw. Carlos stumbled back, holding his face. Jessica screamed, "Mike, stop." I didn't stop. I grabbed Carlos by the collar, my rage taking over. "You think you can just come into my house and explain this away?" Carlos struggled to break free. "I'm sorry, man. I never meant for this to happen." I let him go, shoving him toward the door. "Get out, and don't come back." He stumbled out, blood dripping from his lip. I slammed the door behind him, turning to face Jessica. She was crying, her hands covering her face. "I'm so sorry, Mike. I don't know what's wrong with me." I felt a pang of sadness amid my anger. "I don't know either, Jess, but I can't keep doing this. I need some time to think." I grabbed my keys and walked out, leaving her sobbing in the kitchen. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I needed to get away. As I drove aimlessly through the city, I couldn't shake the feeling that our marriage was unraveling, and I didn't know how to stop it. One evening, as I sat on Dan's couch staring at the ceiling, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Jessica. "Jessica, Mike, can we talk? Please." I took a deep breath, my heart heavy. I knew I couldn't avoid her forever. "Mike." "Okay, I'll come home." When I walked into our apartment, it felt different, colder, emptier. Jessica was sitting on the couch, her eyes red from crying. She looked up at me, a mixture of hope and fear in her eyes. "Mike, I'm so sorry," she began, her voice trembling. "I know I've hurt you, and I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I love you, and I want to make this right." I sat down across from her, my emotions raw. "Jess, I don't even know where to start. This whole open marriage thing, it's destroyed us." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I know. I was selfish and reckless. I thought I wanted freedom, but I ended up losing the most important thing in my life, you." I looked at her, feeling the weight of her words. "Why, Jess? Why did you do it?" She wiped her eyes, taking a deep breath. "I guess I was scared. Scared of settling down, scared of losing my identity. I thought an open marriage would give us both the freedom we needed. But I was wrong, so wrong." I sighed, running a hand through my hair. You didn't just hurt me, Jess. You broke my trust, and that's not something that's easy to fix. I know, she whispered, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes. Counseling, therapy, anything. I just want us to be okay again. I looked at her, searching for the sincerity in her eyes. Carlos, Lucas, Ryan, Ben? What about them? They're out of my life, she said firmly. I ended things with Carlos, and I haven't spoken to the others since that night. I want to focus on us, on rebuilding what we had. I leaned back, feeling the exhaustion of the past few weeks wash over me. I don't know, Jess. I need time to think. She nodded, her expression one of desperate hope. Take all the time you need. I'll be here, waiting. I stood up, feeling the weight of the decision ahead. I need to clear my head. She didn't argue. I understand. I love you, Mike. I love you too, Jess. But love isn't enough right now. As I walked out the door, I felt a mixture of relief and sorrow. I knew that whatever happened next would be crucial for both of us. Whether we could rebuild our marriage or if this was the end of the road. Back at Dan's place, I started to reflect on everything. Our marriage, the open relationship, the betrayal. I realized that while Jessica's actions had hurt me deeply, I needed to figure out what I wanted, not just for us, but for myself. One evening, Dan and I were having a beer on the balcony. So, what's your plan? He asked, his voice calm. I don't know, man. I'm torn. Part of me wants to try and fix things, but another part is telling me to walk away. Dan nodded, taking a sip of his beer. It's a tough call, but whatever you decide, make sure it's what's best for you. Don't do it out of guilt or obligation. His words struck a chord with me. I realized I needed to take control of my life and make a decision that would bring me peace. I spent the next few days soul-searching, thinking about what I wanted and what I deserved. Finally, I made my decision. I went back to our apartment, finding Jessica waiting anxiously. She stood up as I walked in, her eyes filled with uncertainty. I took a deep breath. Jess, I've thought a lot about this. I love you, and I believe you're genuinely sorry. But trust is something that takes time to rebuild, and I'm not sure if I can do that while we're together. Her face fell, tears brimming in her eyes. So, what are you saying? I think we need to take a break, I said, my voice steady. We both need time to heal and figure out what we want. Maybe with time we can find a way back to each other. But right now, I need space. She nodded, her tears falling freely. I understand. I don't want to lose you, Mike, but I respect your decision. I hugged her, feeling the weight of our shared pain. This isn't goodbye, Jess. It's just see you later. After leaving Jessica, I felt like I was floating in a fog. I spent a few more days at Dan's place, but I knew I needed professional help to sort through my emotions. On Dan's recommendation, I made an appointment with Dr. Collins, a well-regarded psychologist in Miami. The first session was nerve-wracking. I wasn't used to opening up to strangers, but Dr. Collins had a calming presence that made it easier. He was in his mid-s with a kind face and a gentle demeanor. So Mikey began settling in his chair. What brings you here today? I took a deep breath and began to recount everything. Jessica's proposal for an open marriage, the nights with other men, and the final straw with Carlos. As I spoke, I felt a mix of relief and vulnerability. Dr. Collins listened intently, nodding occasionally. When I finished, he leaned forward slightly. Mike, it sounds like you've been through a lot. How are you feeling about all of this? Confused, I admitted. Angry. Betrayed. But also, I don't know, lost. He nodded. Those feelings are completely valid. It's important to understand that your emotions are natural responses to what you've experienced. Have you ever heard the term cuckold? I shook my head. No, what does that mean? Dr. Collins sighed softly. A cuckold is someone whose spouse is unfaithful, often with their consent or knowledge, sometimes even participating in it. In many cases, the cuckold experiences feelings of humiliation, which can be deeply damaging. The word hit me like a punch to the gut. So, you're saying I'm a cuckold? In a sense, yes, he replied gently. But it's crucial to understand that this label doesn't define you. What's more important is how you process and move forward from this experience. I sat back trying to process his words. I never thought of it that way. I wanted to make Jessica happy. I didn't want to lose her. Dia Coffins know that. That's understandable. You love her, and wanted to keep your relationship strong. But it's important to recognize when your boundaries are being crossed and your self-worth is being compromised. I guess I didn't see it that way, I said quietly. I thought I was being open-minded, but I just felt weak. You're not weak, Mike, Dr. Collins said firmly. It takes strength to face these challenges and to seek help. The key now is to rebuild your sense of self and establish healthy boundaries. We spent the rest of the session discussing ways to regain my confidence and self-respect. Dr. Collins suggested journaling my thoughts and emotions, focusing on activities that made me feel good about myself, and considering individual therapy to explore deeper issues. When I left his office, I felt a mixture of clarity and trepidation. The word cuckold echoed in my mind, but it also gave me a new perspective on my situation. I realized that I had been trying so hard to please Jessica that I had lost sight of my own needs and boundaries. After a few more sessions with Dr. Collins, I began to see things in a new light. The psychologist helped me understand that I had been manipulated by Jessica's desires and charm. The realization hit me hard, stirring a mix of anger and betrayal that had been simmering beneath the surface. One evening, fueled by a newfound clarity, deep sense of injustice, I decided I needed to confront Jessica and Carlos. I drove to our house, my mind racing with thoughts of the conversations and revelations I had had with Dr. Collins. As I pulled into the driveway, I saw Carlos' car parked out front. The sight of it was like a match to dry tinder. I stormed into the house, not caring about the consequences. Jessica and Carlos were in the living room, their casual conversation abruptly silenced by my entrance. "I'm here to finally speak my mind," I shouted, my voice echoing through the house. "You've manipulated me, used me, and treated me like a fool." Carlos stood up, trying to intervene. "Mike, calm down. Let's talk about this." "Talk? There's nothing to talk about," I yelled, knocking over a vase from the coffee table. "You think you can just waltz into my life and take everything from me?" Jessica stepped forward, her face a mask of concern. "Mike, please, let's not do this." I ignored her, my anger boiling over. I started to knock over furniture, throw books off the shelves, anything to release the rage that had built up inside me. "I trusted you, Jessica. I loved you, and you treated me like I was nothing." The noise of the commotion must have carried to the neighbors. Within minutes, I heard sirens approaching, but I didn't care. I was lost in my fury, determined to make Jessica and Carlos feel even a fraction of the pain I was enduring. The police burst through the door, their voices commanding and firm. "Sir, step away and calm down." I turned to face them, my chest heaving. "She betrayed me." "They both did." One of the officers stepped forward, speaking calmly. "Sir, we need you to calm down and come with us." I was too far gone to listen. I struggled as they restrained me, my shouts turning into incoherent rage. They cuffed me and led me out of the house. Jessica's tearful face the last thing I saw before being shoved into the back of a police car. At the station, I was processed and placed in a holding cell. The reality of my actions began to sink in as the adrenaline faded. I sat on the cold bench, my head in my hands, trying to make sense of everything that had happened. I spent the night in the cell, the harsh fluorescent lights and the distant sounds of the station keeping me awake. The next morning, an officer came to release me, explaining that I was being let go with a warning, but that I would need to attend a court hearing for the damages and disturbance. As I walked out of the station, I felt a heavy weight on my shoulders. I had let my anger consume me, and now I had to face the consequences. I knew I needed to see Dr. Collins again to understand how to move forward from this mess I had created. When I arrived at his office, he greeted me with a concerned look. "Mike, what happened?" I explained everything. From the confrontation at the house to my night at the police station, he listened patiently, nodding occasionally. "Mike, it's clear that you have a lot of pinned-up anger and hurt," he said gently. "But acting out violently isn't the solution. We need to find a healthier way for you to process these emotions." "I know," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I couldn't take it anymore." "We'll work through this together," Dr. Collins assured me. "It's going to take time, but you can heal from this." The incident at the house and my night at the police station marked a turning point for me. I realized I couldn't let my emotions dictate my actions anymore. But that didn't mean I was ready to forgive and forget. Instead, I decided to take a different approach. A calculated, cold approach to get back what was rightfully mine and to make Jessica pay for the pain she had caused. My first step was to meet with a lawyer. Dan recommended a tough, no-nonsense attorney named Laura Mitchell. She had a reputation for being ruthless in court, and that's exactly what I needed. Sitting in her office, I laid out my story. Laura listened intently, her sharp eyes taking in every detail. "So, Mike," she said, leaning back in her chair, "you want to go after everything? The house, the assets, everything?" I nodded. "Yes, I want to leave her with nothing." Laura smiled slightly. "I like your determination, but you need to understand. This won't be easy. We'll need to prove grounds for divorce that favor you. Adultery, emotional abuse, anything we can use. I'm ready to do whatever it takes," I replied, feeling a newfound sense of purpose. Laura nodded. "Good. We'll start by gathering evidence. You mentioned her relationships with other men. That's a good start. We'll need witness statements, any proof of infidelity, and we'll dig into her finances too." Over the next few weeks, Laura and her team worked tirelessly. They interviewed Dan and other friends who knew about Jessica's behavior. They gathered photos, texts, and any other evidence that painted Jessica in a bad light. I felt a grim satisfaction as the case against her built up. During this time, I moved back into the house. Jessica had left, staying with her friend Alicia, which suited me just fine. I didn't want to see her, and I needed the space to focus on my next steps. One evening, as I was going through some old documents, I found our prenuptial agreement. It was something we had signed in the early days of our marriage, back when we were both optimistic about our future. The agreement was clear. In the event of infidelity, the wrong party would receive a significant share of the assets. I took the document to Laura the next day. She examined it carefully, a smile spreading across her face. "This is gold, Mike. With this, we have a strong case. We can argue that Jessica's actions breached the agreement, and you're entitled to the majority of the assets." The court case was set. On the day of the hearing, I felt a mix of nerves and determination. I knew this was my chance to take control of my life and ensure that Jessica faced the consequences of her actions. Jessica arrived with her lawyer, looking anxious but defiant. We avoided each other's gaze as we took our seats. The proceedings began with Laura presenting our case. She laid out the evidence of Jessica's infidelity, emotional manipulation, and breach of the prenuptial agreement. The judge listened carefully, occasionally glancing at Jessica, who shifted uncomfortably in her seat. When it was Jessica's turn, her lawyer tried to paint a picture of a woman who had made mistakes but was genuinely remorseful. They argued that the open marriage had been consensual and that I had agreed to it. But Laura was relentless. She tore apart their arguments, highlighting the emotional toll Jessica's actions had taken on me and the clear breach of our agreement. After what felt like an eternity, the judge finally gave his ruling. He sided with us, awarding me the majority of our assets, including the house. Jessica was left with a small settlement, barely enough to start over. As we left the courtroom, I felt a sense of closure. Jessica approached me, tears in her eyes. "Mike, I'm so sorry. I never meant for things to end like this." I looked at her, feeling a mix of pity and resolve. "It's too late for apologies, Jess. I hope you find a way to move on, but I need to look out for myself now." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Goodbye, Mike. Goodbye, Jessica."